If you can die of a broken heart, then why is mine still beating? That's the line that came to me a while ago. I don't know why particularly, but I do like it, and I thought it could kick us off in this rant that is probably of no use to anyone except maybe two people who have nothing better to do. And I'm sorry that you have nothing better to do, because you should have something better to do, and you probably don't, and that's why you're watching this. And I'm overcome with a feeling of sadness constantly, because I know that nothing I do is good enough, and I know that I'm basically a failure. I'm a failure. And YouTube is just a cope for a bunch of failures like me to show up, because you can't get published, you can't find a good job, so what do? Of course, you turn to YouTube, and now you're a YouTuber, and there doesn't seem to be any point to it, because you're not changing the world, and you're not really doing anyone any good. Even if you have a successful channel, right? You see comments, people saying, I relate to you, you helped me so much with this video. And then you realize, but has she really? Or are you just sort of making that up? Did you just feel 5 seconds of pleasure and then you said a comment? But she didn't really save you. So we're here, and nobody's saving anyone. And it's just a giant mess. And the really successful YouTubers are just scamming you, and they get your money so you can watch absolute fucking bullshit. Like Mr. Beast or something. Oh, let's just watch absolute fucking horseshit. Let's just watch horseshit. Let's feed people's brains with absolute fucking nonsense and make them buy shit. And make them subscribe to the Patreon. Because they can be fucked to do it for free. Because they deserve it. Name me one fucking thing anybody has accomplished on this website or anywhere else that that isn't defeated by something much worse, right? So, you can invent a cure, but what you really need to do is get rid of the disease. And who has done that? Who has rid the world of any kind of disease, any kind of disability? Nobody. Nobody has done it. And I always get into philosophical rants. And so immediately I think of the idea of God. And one reason not to believe in God is because there is about 7 gazillion problems in the world, and not a single one of them has been solved by God. Otherwise those problems wouldn't exist. So if God is all loving and all knowing, why the fuck is he so useless? Why has he not fixed one out of the nearly infinite number of problems that do exist? Every single one still exists, and the rest of them, there's no evidence God fixed any of them. There's only evidence that human beings fixed any of them. Or nature maybe fixed it. But there's no evidence that God does anything. And see, that's a major problem, because if there's no God, then it's only downhill from there. So I made the point that one of the downfalls, significant downfalls of religion is, what leads to its downfall are all these bombastic claims that it makes, like, the central theme is that humanity is at the center of the world. And then when that was refuted by science, it actually undermined the very foundation of religion, the very idea that the world basically exists for a reason and it exists for us. That simple scientific discovery that the earth went around the sun, not the other way around, completely butchered the idea that humanity is at the center of the world, and therefore it undermined religion itself in a significant way. And then evolution came around, and evolution said, you're not special creatures, you're just animals. You are a product of billions of years of evolution, and you're an ape. You're a monkey. And so that was the second thing that led to its at least intellectual downfall. Many people are still catching up, but as people are getting more intelligent, they're going to catch up eventually, and they're going to see, so there's no reason to believe that we are at the center of the world and a good God made the world, because it has all kinds of problems, like the problem of evil, or how can you have a perfect entity? I mean, modern science and mathematics teaches us that there cannot be perfect entities, that if you have a system of sufficient complexity, this is called Gödel's incompleteness theorem, it means it's either it cannot be proved to be complete. There's always an element of incompleteness in it. And that touches on a very foundational issue in philosophy, which is the issue of paradox itself, that if you have a system that's complete, then you can't check the validity of the system from the outside, because then it's not complete, right? If you have to check from the outside, then you need a checker for that, and then a checker for that, and you end up in an infinite regress. And so basically we cannot have a system that's complete and provable at the same time. If it's complete, you can't actually prove that it's complete. If it's not complete, well then it's not complete, and that's also a problem. And I think that's what basically science and mathematics taught us, like quantum mechanics, where you can measure the position and velocity of photons or whatever at the same time, the double slit experiment. I think these are real because they speak to a fundamental paradox that exists at the heart of the universe, which is very speculative, but if you know something about philosophy, and you know about Heraclitus, and you know about Hegel, they all basically said the same thing. Like, there was an ancient Chinese philosopher called Lao Tzu who basically said that a cup is most useful when it's empty. Now, what the hell does that mean? Well, that basically means that if you fill the cup to the brim, well, then it becomes useless, because now you need a new cup. So when it's empty, that's when it's the most useful, because that's when it has the most potential. But when you fill it, right, the more you fill it, the less useful it becomes, because it's running out of space, and now you need a new one. So you can see the kind of paradox of it, that if it's empty, then it looks to be useless, but that's when it's the most useful. When you fill it to the brim, well, now it's worth less. So there's a fundamental paradox to the world. And that was also pointed out by pessimistic philosophers, who said that basically you begin with an incompleteness, right? Life is always incomplete. It's always deficient in something. You don't come into the world happy and fulfilled. The opposite happens. You're hungry and you're horny. This is when you're older. You always want something, and when you feel the gap of that desire, well, then you just get a new one. So that's where the paradox comes in, is that if you get what you want, well, then you're just fucked. So your cup is most useful when it's empty. You need to be dissatisfied and deficient for life to mean anything. Once you are satisfied, there's no reason to live anymore, because there's nothing to feel anymore. Completeness does not exist in this world. And God does not exist if he's complete. If he has everything in himself, he's just not reason. It has to be a Spinozian God. It has to be a God that is all over nature. So that idea basically is done, and so that's important, because that means there's no God coming to rescue. So that's why we have these YouTubers who are trying to save you. And they can provide you with some relief. Like I've been relieved by, there's a YouTuber called No Longer Human, Seven. And she's one of these women, kind of goes under the label of cute girl, whether she likes it or not. And, she brought me some relief by her suffering because, when you're suffering, you want to see other people suffer because it makes you feel better. So she just posted a video about how she almost died of suicide. And it's like, I feel sorry for her, but I also feel better because I know I'm not alone, right? So I doubt she's watching this, but shout out to her. She definitely understands the situation of, if she was actually happy, she would be of no use to me because I need people to be miserable so I can leech off their misery. That's how it works. Happy people leech off of happy people. Miserable people leech off of miserable people. And if you're watching this, you're probably miserable and you're trying to leech off me, which is okay. You can leech off me. But, you should be doing something with your life. And that's the next topic I wanted to get into. Is that I'm kind of a failure as a person. I never really been able to accomplish anything significant. I can't get a job. I can't hold down a job. It's too much for me. And so, it's a working day, right? And I'm supposed to be somewhere working. I'm supposed to be in an office somewhere, some building where people work. But I found myself slowly being isolated from the rest of society. And I just not been able to keep up. So I'm here alone, not really contributing much to the world. But more and more people, it seems, are heading in that direction, where a lot of young people just go to college just so they don't have to work. It's idle time. People use college as idle time. And then many of the people I watch also don't have jobs. These vloggers. They just say, I go to college once a week, And it seems like there's a rise of needs. People who just don't work, don't go to school. And that just speaks to the fundamental decay of society. We all seem to be decaying in some terrible way. And, as people no longer want to play the game, they no longer want to play mommy and daddy, and they no longer want to play, Christmas. And I don't know how they can do it. I don't know how they could do it so far. Never made any sense to me, I can't make any sense out of it. Like, I was at this restaurant and there was this kid and there was the person who works there, and she's kind of an older lady, and they love to do this baby talk of, what are you saying, huh? And it's like, I just don't know how you can. I don't know what psychology goes into making that person, like that triviality of, let's basically raise a retard. Let's put somebody in the world who is retarded and then try to make them unretarded, just so we can stop being nice to them and stop putting them to work and watch them suffer and then die. Like if you ask the question, what's the point of building a civilization? What's the point of playing Sims? What's the point of playing Squid Game? You don't really find a good answer, I don't think. And in Squid Game, they had this option to vote on if they should quit the game or not. And so they had a red button and they had a green button, and that reminded me of the situation of, should we choose to keep building a civilization or not? And more people are pressing the red button. More and more people are saying, well, I don't really want to play daddy and mommy and worker and I'm a man, and that means I can show my emotions, and I have to hide my true feelings. We don't really want to play this game anymore. We don't really, the jig is up. As they say, the jig is up. We don't really want to play religion anymore. And we don't want to bow down to God and mumbo bullshit. Mumbo jumbo on a mat. Well, educated people don't want to do that anymore. They don't want to work because capitalism has already been exposed to be an unfair, cruel system where you basically just serve the rich for your life. That's what you do. You wake up, you serve the rich, you wake up, you serve the rich. And then there's no excuse of religion or having a child because they don't want to do that anymore. So it's like a domino. It's like a set, set of dominoes. One goes, then the other ones go also. And that's what we're seeing today, where, yes, we don't really like the capitalism too much. We don't want to be slaves of other people. We don't want to participate in the injustice of brutal inequality and, wage exploitation and all the ways the rich are helped by the state, which is basically just serves capital. We don't really want to play that game anymore. Having children, baby talk and, lie to children, make them think there's the tooth fairy and then there's the Santa Claus, and we don't really want to lie to children anymore because we know lying is wrong, and what's the point of filling children's heads with a bunch of bullshit? We're not getting laid, we're not getting married anymore because we think that's bullshit and people don't want to do it. We don't want to play mommy and daddy, and we don't want to play the the old gender roles. And so these are all breaking down one by one. We don't believe in God, we don't believe that the ridiculous idea that we're here for a reason when every piece of scientific evidence says otherwise. And there's no reason to hypothesize a God. Just no fucking reason. So all these things are going down one by one. And so the masters of mankind, who run the world, are in a panic, and you can expect that retaliation. They have to be imposing some kind of like pro-natalist, pro-religion scheme eventually, because if they don't, well, they're gonna be out of workers. They're gonna be shit out of luck, and jolly well fucked, because they're not gonna have workers. They're not gonna have. Yeah, that's all they need. They need workers. They need people to make money and make them rich. And if people don't want to do that anymore, well, then what the fuck? What's going to happen now? What the fuck's going to happen now? And so I think it's incredible that people for thousands of fucking years have not been able to figure out until now, very recently, that all of this just exists for them to be exploited, right? The only reason why pronatalism and religion exist and conservative ideology exist is just to make more slaves. They need the system, society needs more slaves. And all you have to say is, no, I'm not going to give you more. And so the revolution all begins with antinatalism, basically, because once people are becoming antinatal for whatever reason, well, then the masters of mankind are in a panic. But they no longer know what to do. And so we're all part of this revolution where society is coming apart. And so maybe the reason why so many of us are suffering today with high rates of mental illness and so on is because we thought we were going through a slow period where nothing happens, but this is not true. That meme, nothing ever happens. No. Actually, lots of things are happening. Sometimes nothing happens for 100 years, but basically, up until now, nothing was happening. Up until now, everything was chugging along. Everything was all hunky-dory for society, for humanity. But now Not so much anymore because people don't like doing it anymore. YouTube is now filled with channels that people talk about how shitty their life is. Constantly complaining about something. That didn't used to exist 20 years ago. I don't know if you remember, but if you watch old vlogs on YouTube, almost none of them, that you could never find the kind of depressing vlogs that exist today. Where, you have the Japanese salaryman, and the whole shtick of his channel is how much his life sucks. And there's like more and more of them. And then you have guys like me, you have incels, you have the cute girls who basically exploit their cuteness, which is okay, but that's what they do, So nobody is really satisfied. Nobody is really saying, yeah, this is so just working out splendidly. Let's make more. There's a very few. There's a small contingent of people who are still pronatalists, who are still into marriage and religion and all that stuff. And even the ones that say they are really just lying. I don't know if you noticed that, but I don't think that somebody like Nick Fuentes really cares about the religion. I don't think he really does. I think it's just, it's convenient because it's part of his image. That's what he's supposed to do. But he doesn't even want to have children. He doesn't even want to get married. And so it's pretty obvious that, it's kind of a shtick, it's Christmas, so, he has his studio set up in Christmas baubles and lights and whatever. But it's pretty obvious that it's almost too in your face, like it's just a prop to him, I don't think he really cares. I don't think he really cares if people are gay. I don't think he really sits down and prays to God in any kind of serious way. I think he's confused. And what's the way of proving it? I just think it's that he really doesn't, like a real way of testing if these conservatives are really conservatives, they actually have children. Do we know if they go to church? Do they have children? I don't think we know any of that about Nick Fuentes. I don't think I ever seen him pray. Don't think I ever seen him read the Bible. He explicitly is a misogynist and does not want to deal with women. So that's the hard part. He can't do that because that's hard. He actually has to do something. But what he can do is talk about conservative values. Dress up his fucking studio with Christmas lights and Christmas trees and lights. He can do that. That's easy to do. Talking about it is also easy. But to actually do it, well, that's hard. So it's funny when conservatives talk about how trans people are confused. Well, I think they're confused. A lot of young men who are right-leaning today are obviously in some kind of identity crisis. And so, they sort of make use of, the daddies of, Nick Fuentes and, Bronze Age pervert and Nick Land and Nietzsche and Yukio Mishima and the rest of these conservative, patriotic philosophy, all that stuff. These young men are really confused about their identity. They're not finding themselves. They don't know what the fuck they are or why they are doing it. So, if anybody is confused here, it's these young men who are pretending they need to be Christian, to be based, pretending they need to hate gay people, and somehow that makes them really based. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. They're much more confused. But, basically the revolution, that's why they call it quiet quitting. The revolution today is a revolution of doing nothing whatsoever. The way the revolution transpires today is by a refusal to participate. And so, well, that's really convenient because we don't actually have to do anything, and we have discovered that by doing nothing, we can actually do everything. That's another paradox, that by just refusing to participate in the system, working. Maybe you just take a part-time job or whatever. Maybe you make your money online. By refusing to have children, by refusing to go to church. Well, we have discovered the paradox that we can actually change the world by doing nothing whatsoever. And so that's a new kind of revolution that nobody has ever thought about except maybe Buddhist monks. That you can change the world by doing nothing. You can press the red button by doing nothing. So what's going on now is we're pressing the red button in Squid Game. In the future, the way to capture what people do in art is to have them do nothing whatsoever. So then artists are going to have to come up with ways of showing quiet desperation. I'm thinking if this is happening already, but I can't think of anything, because I just think in the future people wouldn't actually sign up to Squid Game. They'd be too lazy. So we're going to have a situation where we're going to have to capture people doing nothing in order to capture what they're doing, which is nothing. We're not doing anything, right? The revolution of today is to do nothing. And so this is a new, completely unprecedented time, a time when it seems like nothing is happening, but really everything is happening. How do you recover from this? I think there's really no way of going back. There's not going to be a pronatalist renaissance. In the future, but there will have to be a kind of pushback from humanity, because I think there are basically three levels of analysis. You have the individual, you have society, but then you also have humanity. So one thing I like about the anime AOT, Attack on Titan, is that it talks about humanity all the time. It's not enough to critique society. Society itself is beholden to humanity. Humanity is kind of this giant organism. So the biggest organism on the planet is something called Pando, which means I spread. And Pando is one tree, but it's actually thousands of different stems. And so it covers a huge area, covers dozens of, I don't know what, probably hundreds of miles or something like that, I don't know. Hectares. And so that's what Pando is, but it's really just one tree. And humanity is very similar to that. That humanity looks to be many different trees, but it's actually one. There's a giant kind of superorganism. And so we should be thinking about what humanity will do to us, what humanity will do to individuals, and what humanity will do to society. And I think humanity is going to have these autistic meltdowns because we are living in an age that I would call autisticine. We're also living in an age of dark enlightenment where, we are more enlightened than we used to be, but it's not a good thing. It's not the beautiful, happy thing that many philosophers thought, that that was the Dark Ages, but now there's the Light Ages. No. The Enlightenment turned out to be something quite dark and pessimistic. That will lead humanity to have autistic meltdowns. because humanity does not want to die. That every organism has an interest in continuing its own life for whatever reason. It's part of its nature to want to grow. So if we're the meddlesome bits of humanity, humanity is going to have to find some ways of, taking care of us. Going to have to find a way of imposing some kind of order. And so I think that will lead to, so there's downward pressure. And I think it's possible that there will be a pronatalist attack from humanity, where some governments might decide out of pure desperation to just ban abortions, ban contraceptives. I think that there's technologies where you can actually create. You won't need a womb. You will have like an unnatural womb. And in the unnatural womb, you can cultivate human beings in the future, maybe. And but then those human beings that are cultivated in the artificial womb, how are they gonna feel about this? So I really have a hard time figuring out what's gonna happen. I haven't figured it out. I feel like it might be too difficult to figure out what's gonna happen. But it's definitely not looking good, because the forces of humanity are no longer kind of unified. We're not just like chugging along anymore. Where, okay, we have some wars and we have some disagreements, but basically we all believe in the project of humanity. We're not nihilistic. Well, it's more and more difficult to not be nihilistic. More and more difficult to not see the problems. And so this is going to cause a clash between individuals, society, and humanity as such. And I don't really know how to predict what's going to happen out of that, other than something not quite pleasant. Today's age is very ironic. There's a lot of irony. And that's obviously just a defense mechanism. If you have... See, sincerity is a very difficult thing to do. Irony is a way to mask sincerity. So in a way, people are more sincere than they used to be, because they know they can hide it using a good deal of irony. And so I think that's what's happening today. 4chan, trolls. These people are really good at hiding their true intentions. And so there's a kind of revolution of jesters who pretend that they're just joking, but they're completely serious. So one thing that I've discovered before is that you should not discard people who are joking around by thinking they're not actually serious. Because the people that are joking around are probably more serious than the people who aren't. They are too afraid, or they just can't, because of TOS, terms of service. They just can't say what they really mean. So they have to hide it in irony. Those are the people that are the most dangerous, because those are the people that are really planning something, that really want something. And that's why I've spoken before about George Carlin and how everybody calls him a philosopher, comedian. But in a way, that designation is wrong, because George Carlin was not meant to be a philosopher. If he was a philosopher, nobody would have paid the slightest attention to him. The stuff that he was saying is actually pretty obvious when you think about it, at least to us today. Probably wasn't so obvious 25 years ago, but today it's pretty obvious. And so the thing that makes him really popular is just the fact that he's masking right? That's another artistic term. He's masking the intention behind his words, which are probably sincere. He was not merely joking around when he talked about how much he loved violence and how shitty, worthless humanity is, and we're just a bad case of fleas. We are just gonna be consumed by the earth, or just flicked off by the earth. His absolute disdain for society, for capitalism. These were not just jokes. He meant every word. But he can't be a philosopher, because if he was a philosopher, well, he would just be saying something we all know and agree with. We all know deep down today that George Coyne is basically right. That the reason they call it the Ten Commandments is because it's a psychologically satisfying number. All the ways he made fun of authority. He meant every word, and we know that he's right. But we can't quite swallow it whole. It has to be masked, has to be put in the form of a joke. Because we can't follow it straight. Nobody really wants to say what it really means because it's just too much to say. So, if I say that, well, life is basically a big piece of crap, it's an imposition, I would have preferred not to be born. But these are really hard things to say. I mean, it kind of makes you sound like a lunatic, like there's something wrong with you. Or if I was honest about my sexual proclivities and I said, oh, look at the girl with the tits. You can't say that stuff, right? You can't just be completely offensive and completely honest. You can't just say, God, I really just hate people. Can you all just fucking, you can't say that. So we have to mask it. And pay attention to the fact that when people joke about this stuff, when they put it in different words, don't think of that as less serious than it actually is, because they mean every word. The more they joke, the more they dance around it, the more they mean it. A guy who honestly says, well, I'm a white supremacist, not me, but a guy who would, is probably less dangerous than a guy who says, well, I'm not a white supremacist, but, white doesn't mix with black all that well sometimes, or I don't know, I can't come up with a good one, but you know what I mean. The guy that jokes around probably has bigger convictions about it than the guy who doesn't joke around. So I think that's why Trump got elected, because he was a troll. He probably... See, the thing is, Trump, I don't know what's in his head, but it's clear that he has more conviction than everybody else up there. Because everybody else was obviously just a soulless liar. But Trump was not just a soulless liar. He probably meant everything he said. You know what I mean? I'm the greatest, and he probably means it. It sounds like a joke. But he means it. He probably doesn't know how ridiculous he sounds, and he doesn't need to. So pay attention to the fact that being solemn, being honest and straightforward, although it's something to praise, it's not really, it's not a sign of absolute conviction. A guy who jokes around is the guy who's probably most convinced. That's why jokes are funniest when you're not supposed to laugh, and that's why people like to joke in fucked up situations, I think, because, well, they know something's going down, so now they gotta joke about it. But if you're just able to be completely straightforward, well, it seems like not much is happening. So this is why we're living in an age where things are ironic. Society, polite society, is supposed to be honest and straightforward, or at least solemn. Like you make small talk, but you do it in a kind of, it's not honest, but it's not ironic either. It's really simple and straightforward. Just the way people politely talk to each other, and they say hi, what's going on with you, good morning, all that shit. That kind of politeness is going away now, and the way you talk to people now is almost like, you don't even say good morning, you say, fuck you, you piece of shit, or whatever, but this is not a sign of something necessarily good or liberating. This is a sign of weakness. It's a sign of a certain level of deficiency, impotence. You can't really face the world honestly and straightforwardly, so you have to make a joke about everything. So that's when you're really giving a sign that something is wrong, something is not working, something is happening. So in times of irony, when George Carlin is really famous, where Nick Fuentes is really famous, these are all jesters. When Donald Trump is really famous, well, these are times when many things are happening, and it's a sign that, people do have these convictions. But their convictions are so strong they can't actually say them clearly and straightforwardly. So that's why when you go on YouTube and you see, there's a lot of, like, racism today is almost, it became normalized. As we go on YouTube, everything is filled with anti-Semitic jokes, racist jokes. People talk about pattern recognition and the 109 countries that the Jews were kicked out of. Of course, they have the causation backward. So there's no point in arguing against anti-Semitism, but obviously, I'm not a bigot. And it's pretty clear to me that this is just throwing the blame on somebody. This is classic not victim blaming, but it's victim blaming, and it's also kind of a sacrificial lamb kind of situation. But so that's become normalized. Being racist against Indians has become normalized. And this is not good. And it's really not good because it's ironic. And that means people believe it. But I mean, I got pissed off because I really don't like, see, being genuine is not going to work, but I really don't like racism. I really don't like it when people pretend they're better than others because they live in a better country. It's only better because of exploitation, But if you take a look at India, even for a second, and you do some research, you realize that India is one of the most culturally rich countries in the world. It produced two major religions, two major world religions. It was foundational to modern mathematics. Many Indian mathematicians discovered some of the basic tools of mathematics. And when you look at the innovation index for a poor country, India is doing really good. Like it's innovative. It's an innovative country with some pretty high level universities, and there's a lot to the country. And it also has the second number of most billionaires. And so you can't just pretend this is not just a shithole. Like, it's not just people living in shit. There's enormous amounts of money and cultural inheritance. And of course, the reason that it's poor is because it was colonized. So India used to be one of the richest countries in the world. I just checked it on Google, but India used to be one of the richest countries in the world before the British came and colonized it. So I don't like it when people say pattern recognition. Because human beings are famously good at pattern recognition, but that's meaningless without putting it into context. If I recognize a pattern, 1, 3, 6, 9. That's a pattern. No. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Okay, that's a pattern. It's a better pattern. Well, it's a pattern, but it doesn't fucking mean anything. So the people that talk about pattern recognition, and I know they're not listening to this, it's not good enough as an answer. It's not just, the Jews own this, the Jews own that. Perhaps they own some things, but have you taken a look at the context that, maybe the Jews are just more educated? So what? That's a pattern, but it doesn't tell you much about anything. It doesn't tell you that the Jews control the world. So pattern recognition is not the same as extrapolation. But this kind of intellectualism is not going to help. I could critique the left. There's so much to critique the left about too. I think one mistake they made is just they didn't give enough to white people and men. They put too much emphasis on be nice to minorities, but have nothing for men. Like one paradox is that other people can assert their identity, but if it's a white person that says, well, I like being white, and I like being German, and I like being Swedish, and I want to maintain my identity, but I really don't care for that stuff. But what's wrong with it? Why is that Nazi? But if somebody else does it, that's okay. Of course, there's a context to it. I know that it has to do with white supremacy, but there's nothing supremacist per se about wanting to maintain your own culture and say that, well, I don't feel guilty for being white. I might even be proud of being white. Well, I disagree with that, but to say that that's immediately Nazi is just so they didn't put enough effort into being welcoming, and that was probably not a good idea. The constant browbeating. Like if you go up to one of these liberal streamers like Dean Withers, if you say that Kamala Harris's name wrong, like you say Kamala, not Kamala, they will correct you. And that's nice when you're a really polite guy, but most people don't have patience for that. And the right is so much better at accommodating people, and you need to have a certain amount of flexibility to accommodate people. One reason that the left has been kind of mainstream liberalism has been falling away, I think it's probably because they just didn't put enough emphasis on being accommodating of white people and men specifically. And there was just too much emphasis on, let's put a gay guy in every movie, and make that be a significant portion of the thing. It just wasn't a good idea. That's all. But it doesn't really matter what I say, does it? It's not like these people are gonna listen and see, okay, we should have done this, we should have done that. On both sides and in the middle, people are too stupid. People just don't have, for whatever reason, even though they're more intelligent than they used to be in general, they still don't have the maturity to get things right. They're still too blinded by everything. It's just not good enough. Again, I could complain for several years. Maybe I should. So anyway, I could talk about many things, but it's probably enough for now. It's making videos too long. It's just kind of pointless. So yeah, I We should probably stop. If you can die of a broken heart, why is mine still beating? Why do I feel so sunken and depraved? What have I done to rate this feeling? Why is my heart still beating if there's no point to it beating? Why am I here? What do I do to make it worth it, even a little bit? Am I just another fat fuck, useless sack of shit, like almost everybody else whose heart is beating happily? What's the point of their life? What's the point of mine? What are we here to do? I don't seem to find a point to it. I'm afraid it will transpire, and then nothing will happen. There will be no point to any of the suffering or any of the pleasure. It will simply exist for the sake of existing, for the sake of having existed. Not a single suicide, not a single tragedy would be justified in the end. There is no hand that comes to the rescue. No God or not even the devil that comes to the rescue. We live, we do ridiculous shit, and then we die. Get horny, get hungry, get sleepy, go to the doctor to get a prescription for something, even though you will die anyway. You're staving off something that cannot be staved off. What's the point? The same tragedies that people spoke about hundreds of years ago still persist. So what's the point? Oh, don't play statistical games. Just because things are better for some people doesn't mean they're better for everyone. Everyone is actually more than it used to be hundreds of years ago. It's not better, it's worse. And even if it was better, it would still exist on a giant pile of suffering and injustice. It would still be pointless, and it would still be better if it didn't exist at all. Peacefully. I wish it didn't exist peacefully. All the tragedies, even now, even today, even this second, this minute, they keep happening over and over and over. The endless cycle of hate, the Squid Game. Fat guys eating too much, thinking that will help. Constantly being fooled by life. Just eat this, take this, then you will be happy. Just fuck that bitch, then you will be happy. Make that money, then you'll be happy. But you know that even the millionaires are not happy, and the billionaires are not happy. That's why they need so much money and so much stuff. Because they know it's all pointless in the end. You can't smear gold on shit and pretend it's not shit anymore. None of it has any point. There's no point to it, and that's a problem. There's nothing to do, so we make shit up. That's a problem because it's not real, it's not authentic. There's no point to it. It's artificial, like AI. Talking to AI because there's no one else to talk to. But AI is not a human, it just appears to be human. There's no point in making money, no point in jerking off or having sex, no point in eating or breeding or leading or even really living. Like an old movie, like Bukowski said, it will go away like an old movie. There's nothing there. Like it or not, at the best of times it's pointless. The worst of times it's really, really bad. Those odds are not good odds. There's no argument against this. The argument is strong and simple, persuasive. Gone are the days when you can just tell people they're mentally ill and therefore they're not correct about what they say. Maybe happiness is a mental illness. But they refuse to say that in the DSM. They have conflated happiness with health, happiness with objectivity. They think if somebody's depressed or anxious, there's something wrong with them fundamentally. But they haven't stopped to consider that maybe life is anxiety-inducing, that life is depressing, that those who have that perception are closer to a more accurate representation of reality than those who bounce around happy. Intelligence truly is the opposite of life. The more intelligent a creature, the fewer children it has, the less it populates itself, the less it populates the earth, and the less it reproduces itself. There are a bunch of jesters jesting. George Carlin is jesting. I'm jesting. Nick Fuentes is jesting. Donald Trump is jesting. Irony has taken over. Nobody wants to breed. Everybody wants to jest. Irony is a way to hide your true intentions, and so it works. Dark enlightenment. Everything is darker now. Everything is bleak. Less and less people don't believe in God. Or more and more people don't believe in God. Less and less they attend church. They're less likely to have children. And they're more likely to be ironic. To be ironic about it. Suffer and be ironic about it. Be cynical and nihilistic and be ironic about it. Paper it over with jokes. But humanity doesn't like that. When the dominoes start falling, when people in Squid Game press the red X button instead of playing the game again, humanity does not like that. Humanity will do everything in its power to stop us from jumping ship, from not playing the game, from not playing mommy and daddy and feed children bullshit, lie to them, tell them that Santa Claus is real. But more and more when we do experiments to confirm that this is fake, humanity will unleash its power against us. Maybe they will force us to breed. Maybe they will engineer us to breed. Humanity will disappear, but not without putting up a fight. But in the end, it will all be pointless. All of it will have been pointless because there is no God and there is no purpose to life. Everything fundamentally is made out of deficiency. You're here and you want to do things because you're deficient. If that was not so, there would be no point of living. So God itself cannot possibly exist, given that God is perfect. And God has been replaced by science. Because the major religions have said that the earth is the center of the world. When that was flipped over, the fundamental point of religion was flipped over and negated. When big religions said that we're not just animals, that we're not just bugs, that we're not just monkeys. When that was flipped over by evolution, it knocked out the second strongest leg of religion. Quantum mechanics and Gödel's incompleteness theorems, transfinite infinitives, transfinite infinites. Some infinites are bigger than others. All these paradoxes that appear in philosophy, in science, tell us that the world is fundamentally confused, incomplete. It doesn't have the cosmic order that we once attributed to it. This is a major problem. If there is no loving God that knows everything and takes care of us, that is a big problem. If people see that capitalism is just a way to make wage slaves, that's not good because people won't want to have children anymore. They don't want to have children. They don't want to play the game. They don't want to play Squid Game. That's no good if humanity is to survive. This is bad for humanity, but good for individuals. If someone doesn't come into existence, they're not harmed. But there is the benefit of no suffering. The absence of the joy is not bad, because there's no one to be deprived. Nobody has shed tears because there's nobody on Venus. Many people have shed tears because there's not nobody on Earth. And what's the point of these tears? If there's no God, there's no cosmic justice, there's no cosmic purpose, there's no higher purpose, then what's the fucking point? George Carlin has told us that the world is basically bullshit. That we're just a bad case of fleas. And the Earth will punt us off into nothing. If you think there's a solution, he said, you're part of the problem. I happen to agree. There's a quiet revolution in quiet desperation. By doing nothing, we can actually do everything. By giving up on the idea of saving humanity, we can actually save it. But why? Why are we so arrogant as to think that we can save anybody else? We can only save ourselves. And that, ironically, that cynically and nihilistically, by refusing to have children, by refusing to participate in the systems that crush us. It's a queer, strange kind of revolution. That is basically the fundamental reason that I am the person that I am. These are my thoughts. These are the arguments that push me to this, to be